folks. Gavin Roth here with episode 26 of the Roth Revenue Podcast. This is the Influencers of Sponsorship Marketing series, and the first dealing with the impact COVID-19 is having on the sponsorship and sports marketing space. I firmly believe that from crisis comes innovation. Many have used that term lately. People and businesses are forced to reimagine how they operate. The virtual economy has arrived in force. Brands like Zoom, Twitch, Peloton, and Skip the Dishes are poised to become a large part of our lives, much more so than they were even 3 to 4 weeks ago. And on a very micro level, this is my first video podcast and my first panel discussion, and the plan is to keep them coming. I'm joined here by Sarah Stovold, Ian Malcolm, and Cary Kaplan. Sarah is Managing Director of Next Wave by IMI. IMI has an ongoing coronavirus tracking study to contextualize trend and provide fact-based insight around evolving consumer attitudes and behaviors. Ian is President and CEO of Lumency. He's been on the podcast before. Lumency is a leading sponsorship, XM, and content agency that represents brands like Toyota, Labatt, General Mills, and TELUS, among others. And Cary is President and CEO of Cosmos Sports and Entertainment, a top full-service S&E marketing firm with an unparalleled track record in ticket sales. These are three great authorities with perspective on how the pandemic touches the sponsorship marketing space. Now, as mentioned in the podcast, we can all agree that there are far more important matters facing people and businesses than how sponsorship marketing plans have been turned upside down. Our chat covers 4 themes: impact, the new normal, helping moment, and optimism. And you may be surprised by the level of optimism that comes through in our conversation. I hope you enjoy. And for more episodes of the Roth Revenue Podcast, follow me on LinkedIn, visit Spotify, SoundCloud, or check out rothrevenue.com. First off, thanks everybody for doing this. I certainly didn't anticipate an episode of my sponsorship marketing podcast dealing with the impact of a global pandemic. And let me caveat everything by saying, I know we are aligned on the fact that there are far more important matters facing people and business right now than how sponsorship marketing plans have been turned upside down. So I think we can all agree on that. There are 4 themes I'd like to cover in this conversation. One is impact. The other one's new normal, helping moment, and optimism. I want to close on optimism. I think when I sent you notes, I actually put it in the middle, but I'd like to close on optimism. Lord knows we all need it right now. So from an impact standpoint, why don't I just start with, how are you all doing? Like, this is a crazy new reality we're facing. Maybe Sarah, I'll start with you. Like, give us a little insight into how this has kind of turned you. You've got all these inspirational sayings behind you, but I have a feeling you had those before.
I did, yeah. But I need them more than ever.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the impact is unquestionable. I mean, when everybody in the world is affected by something in one way or another, whether it's your concern about your health or concern about your finances, which we know is prevalent across the globe, and especially in Canada. I mean, when you talk to people about when we expect this whole thing to be over, Canadians are telling us September. We've got, in the 80s in terms of percent concerned about their personal health, and more than 70 concerned about their finances. So at this second, it's absolutely impacting all of us. Absolutely. So if you're healthy and you're lucky and you're feeling fortunate about that, you're figuring out how to pay rent. So I think that all of us, I mean, from a personal and from a business perspective, would absolutely say this is impacting every part of how we're existing in this moment. But to jump to the optimistic piece, I think we can agree that this is a moment in time and that this will be over at some point. And so focusing on how to come out the other side a little bit stronger and learn a couple things along the way is really important.
Well said. I don't need to ask you two then. That was pretty comprehensive. Cary, what are your thoughts?
Yeah,
I've known you for a long time. You're an optimistic guy.
Yeah, and optimism. We'll talk about that. But it's hard not to agree with what Sarah's saying. I mean, I think probably World War II, which is, I believe, predates all of us. Really, it was probably the last time that the world. It wasn't. It's bigger than, from a world. It's not. 9/11 was impacted, the States and us, and yes, plane travel for a while, but every single country in the world was in essence on lockdown. It's I think it's just health first. I think that's no matter what you can. I think it's almost not right to, even as you stated it, Gavin, at the beginning. I think it doesn't feel right to even have these conversations without saying, let's be healthy. And it hit 1 million people last night. So I think that's, yes, I'm in sports and entertainment, so that industry closed. Like, it's officially closed in the entire world. There is no. I think I said to Gavin, I'm looking for, like, there is inter-squad baseball in South Korea, and that is the most. That's the right.
Mhm.
So you cling to optimism. I think that is the closest thing in the world to sports and entertainment. So it's, of course, it's affecting everybody.
And I tell people I have not looked forward to yard work more in my life. So that might be one, and I'm the least handy and yard worky person there is. Ian?
Good morning. Thanks for having me this morning. I echo the other panelists, where you sort of anchor to gratitude a little bit more about what you do have, and certainly health is first. I have parents in their 80s, so I'm concerned about them. That said, my mother spent the first part of her life growing up in London in World War II, and my father talked about polio epidemic and tuberculosis epidemic when he was a kid. So I think we've had such a long run of really good luck as a society that we're just not used to dealing with this. And if we talk to our grandparents or our great-grandparents, this might be just sort of de rigueur. So I think anchoring to gratitude is really important, and just appreciating things that we can't do now. Like I long to go and sit on a patio and have a beer. I don't remember what it was like to be outside my neighborhood almost. It's just a big change to life, but we're here and we're healthy, and hopefully all of our loved ones are as well.
Yeah, a friend of mine came back from Mexico just before and went into self-quarantine, and we were all very proud of her for, adhering. That's such an important thing now. We're all worried that people who come back are not playing by the rules. And she was just, every day was a countdown. Day 11, day 12, day 13. I'm losing my mind. I can't wait to go out for a walk. Like, that was just simple things that we get back to cherishing the simple things, which, we'll talk a little bit about that during the chat, that it's maybe reconnected us with the simple things that matter. So there are some interesting silver linings. From a business standpoint, today, you wake up today and you're all in business, Sarah, with tremendous and respected global research firm IMI, and Cary with one of the top sports marketing agencies in the country, Cosmos, and Ian with one of the top XM sponsorship agencies, Lumency. You guys are all really at the forefront of what you do. But today, you operate in a very different way. You wake up to different dynamics and ways of doing business than you personally in your respective business than you did 6 to 8 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Cary, how are things different, like in the way you're conducting business today? What are the dynamics you're facing that you didn't face then?
Yeah, well, as I said, I mean, it's everything's turned upside down. It's totally different. I mean, the simple thing is the way we're communicating. We're all virtual, and we're having a lot of. I've become. I was not a star. I'm not saying I'm a star at video chat, but I'm doing 8 of them a day. So that's.
I can attest he was not. He was not a star. He's come a long way. Yeah.
I still have to do some work on my backgrounds and my more. I don't have any of the quotes, or Gavin's got a nice picture there. So you guys are good. But so that's just the that's the practical side of it. But I think I'm not sure if this is exactly answering your question. And every industry and every organization is affected differently. I think what we're trying to do as a company and then with our clients is to avoid panic. And there's some people that have to panic, that they don't see an out and maybe they're in a certain amount of debt but I found certain sports organizations, for instance, have handled it very differently. Some groups have closed or laid everybody off or laid massive amounts of people off, and others have tried to, I think, Ian and Sarah, you guys both mentioned this. Obviously, the hope and the feeling is it's a moment of time. We don't know how long the moment is, if it's 2 months or 4 months, but that something.
Sarah knows. Sarah knows. She'll tell us.
Sarah knows. Yeah. But it's sort of thinking, okay, what's your 2021? I think that we're trying to keep people as best as we can from panic, and as a business, and saying, okay, if you can be strong and weather the storm, which is a apt expression, I think it's a funny, awkward word to use, but there's opportunity for those people who can effectively weather the storm. And in our industry, we're seeing that it's a big range. There are a lot of companies, again, entertainment events that are on full shutdown, lockdown panic. And I think if you can avoid it, our recommendation is if you don't have to go that route, trying to. There's a lot of good people in a lot of organizations. It's just the last part. I think most people want to work, as opposed to be, even if you got the exact same money to be laid off versus working. I think most people, they want to work, and I think we're trying to find ways to encourage again, groups not to panic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's a couple of ways to answer that. One would be, we're a brand side agency, so how are we talking to our clients about how they respond? And this isn't suggesting this is our direct advice to all of our clients, because the advice would go to any brand where this is the time to anchor to what your brand stands for, and it's what you do in this 10-week period that will be remembered for the next 10 years. And probably put EBITDA to the side and focus on liquidity and sustainment for your business, and distinguish the difference between selling moments and helping moments. I think, Kevin, you and I talked about this a week or so ago. Mm-hmm. Sales moments will come if you manage the helping moments properly now. And then from our business perspective, we've been working on Zoom. We're in multi-geographies as a team, and we've been working on Zoom for probably 3.5 years now. So we're very used to this. And I think what some organizations are recognizing, that they don't have agility and flexibility built into their structure as it is, and I think they're finding it harder to adapt. We're finishing off 3 weeks working from home with our Canadian team, 4 weeks with our US team. And it's been pretty seamless. It certainly emphasizes the importance of face-to-face and being together in a room. I think there's some chat around that this may be the new normal, that we'll all be much more comfortable working from home. But we certainly see, including from our younger team members, the strain of just not having the human connection in the traditional sense. But we're doing things in our business, and stop me if I'm taking this to the wrong place, but we do bi-weekly all hands meetings. We have daily team stand-ups for 15 minutes where a team comes together and talks about what they've got going on for the day. We have a virtual lunchroom open every day. We have virtual happy hour on Fridays. Yeah. Finding ways to connect people and making sure that everyone is okay. In the end of week 2, we counseled our team, if they lived alone, go and stay with somebody. Because if you're working from home and you're living alone in a small downtown Toronto or downtown New York condo, that can be a tough week.
Yeah, no, that was great, and different answers, but both very relevant to the topic. Before I get to Sarah, it's that I remember when I spoke to you early, Ian, it was you mentioned some of that, and I thought it was very insightful, and that young person part is an interesting one. In some ways you think young millennials, young execs would would be comfortable with this, the work from home and the shift to the virtual economy. But in the face of a global pandemic, I find that's one of the more vulnerable groups. And those of us with perspectives, I've said this to many people, whatever the term is, but I've worked through 9/11 and SARS and seen, things that, and it perspective and scar tissue is a healthy thing at times like this. And some of the younger execs haven't had that. And so it's jarring to them and scary. So it's important for us to provide that leadership, right? Sarah, what are your...
sorry, go on. Yeah, sorry, just to cut in. I think it's also and Sarah can speak to this better than I, but it's a demographic proposition. Our younger team members or younger consumers, their lifestyle is about being out in the world and exploring. People in our age range are maybe more used to, we've gone through that stage of our life, and being at home is part of what we do anyway. And just the lack of ability for someone in their 20s to be out exploring the world and living their usual lifestyle adds some strain. One of my good friends who's about my age said, "Is it wrong that I don't want to leave my house? Like, I'm quite happy here with my books and my TiVo," and TiVo's dating myself, my Netflix. I do not have a TiVo.
Okay, yeah. For the record, I can edit that out if you want. Yeah. Sarah, your thoughts? As I keep talking, as I close my blinds, the sun. Good problem. The sun's shining in my face, but
yeah.
Go.
So like Cary, I mean, I think our primary focus at this second is to avoid the paralysis that comes with not knowing what to do and doing nothing. And so obviously wanting to avoid that circumstance where everything shuts down and then we have no idea how to get restarted. And when we go back, we don't know what to say and we don't know how to do it. And to everything that Ian said around, finding a purpose and then being able to stand true to that and get the moment right, it will be essential that when brands go back in a big way and in a more selfish way, that it is perceived and understood and felt in the right vein when it hits consumers as well. So, I mean, for us at this second, it's purely focused on trying to add context and perspective and value to the different leagues, teams, properties, people, family members, anyone that can benefit from understanding a little bit more fact-based, how people are feeling, how this is impacting them, recognizing that it's changing on a daily basis. And so in field every single week, asking lots of different types of questions. And some of them never see the light of day because it's just too pessimistic and it's just not helpful. But at the end of the day, trying to focus on what can we learn, what can we understand, how can we set the stage so that when we're ready to come back, we're doing it in the right way and in a way that will be remembered for the next 10 years, as Ian said, for the right reasons. So, I mean, definitely a shift to virtual, of course. I mean, that can go without saying at this moment. I think the only addition that I would make to the other comments is that life stage is certainly impacting this moment and what's possible from a balance perspective. So I've got a 4-year-old at home. Thank God I have a partner that is tackling this with me, because otherwise calls like this just wouldn't be possible. I mean, he needs a lot of hand-holding at this moment in his life. And so trying to figure out how to be a fully present parent that's educating and nourishing and engaging and helping him go to the bathroom. And then,
this is the 4-year-old, not the partner. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good.
But I mean, it's an entirely different challenge. And so I think, again, not to come straight back to the optimism, but the resilience has been astounding. And if you told me that this scenario was going to play out, I would have been terrified and probably underestimated what would have been possible. So I've been happily surprised by how well we've fared, all things considered.
Well, that's it, right? And the human spirit, we'll talk about that, has really had a chance to resurface. And it happens whenever there is tragedy and crisis, but it's just the sense of people, even at a micro level, to your point, in households doing things differently. My girls are 20 and 21. Thankfully, they're here with us. So we don't have the young kids, but we have dogs, and the one of them has a new little dog, 4 months old. So that's given us a great sense of joy and occupation. at a time like this, but it's almost become acceptable that these things happen, and that that interview years ago where that professor was interrupted by his toddler who crashed the party and sat on his lap, and I think his wife ran in to try and get the kid out. It was quite a moment, but now that's the norm, right? Is people doing these things and getting interrupted, but hey, it's perspective. If that's the worst problem, so be it, right?
Yeah, we're all doing the best we can.
We're all doing the best we can. So shifting to a new normal, again, so much of the impact on sponsorship marketing, on the sponsorship marketing space, has come from the cancellation. Cary, you talked about it, of postponement, cancellation of events, be it festivals, be it sports, arts, even gala dinners. You think about the cost sector, how many events, and I've said this to many people, just think of the sheer volume of logistic changes, scrambling to cancel, postpone, move. It's just, it's the volume of it can blow your mind, you name it. Now, none of us know exactly when people will be able to gather en masse, if we're gonna come back with maybe modified, no crowds, then modified crowds, spacing. So just going around, and Ian, I'll start with you on this one. When that time comes, what do you feel the new normal will look like for, let's talk about brands first as it relates to their sponsorship and events, sponsorship of events, and then we'll talk maybe to properties.
Well, starting point maybe would be that none of us are going to get March, April, and May back. So the capacity for consumers to consume entertainment and sports and cause and culture is not going to expand. So if a consumer goes back to some semblance of normal, call it early summer, if they're a Gen Zer and had planned to go to 4 music festivals this summer, they may go to 2. So there's that capacity issue, I think, and think of even the major league sports teams coming back, who may all be on top of each other. Just the supply and demand, there may be a gap there. IMI International is one of our research partners, and we've been following what they share with us now bi-weekly pretty closely. And there seems to be a shift going on, at least in terms of expectation of how consumers will react. Where a couple of weeks ago, the hypothesis was consumers will come back and want small, local, neighborhood, safe, psychologically safe sort of experiences. And now it seems, not to give Sarah away your stuff, but it seems there's pent up a demand growing for going to the big events and going to be with lots of people, and including going to restaurants and just going shopping. So I think that's important. We certainly in our experiential practice have spent a lot of the last 4 weeks doing exactly what you're talking about, is closing things down, repositioning things, contingency planning, all that sort of thing. But I think my human instinct would say that normal will come back sooner than we probably think, but there's sort of a short term, a midterm, and then a long term, what normal will mean. And my hope is that the short term normal, people bring with them some of the, Gavin, you mentioned some of the special moments you're probably having with your family over this time that you might not normally have had. I hope we might be a little less connected digitally and more connected in terms of analog and human connection. I certainly know for myself, I try and live in gratitude a lot, but the things I take for granted now and what I'm grateful for has shifted in the last 3 weeks. I hope.
I don't know if it was you, Ian, who said it to me. I've heard this, but there was a shift back to analog. Maybe a while ago there was this move, right? And maybe that's not going to go away anytime soon. Yeah,
you and I have talked about what my friend Mark Harrison at T1 calls the festivalization of North America, where there's been pressure on Tier 1 sports.
Mark always crashes every one of these things. So I'm like, okay, let's go.
But there's been pressure on tier 1 sports. There's been an increase in tier 2, tier 3 sports in terms of attendance. There's more food, agricultural, cultural, community festivals than ever. And what we've seen is consumers spend so much of their time in the digital realm. They're looking for, even before COVID, they're looking for ways to have live, real experiences.
Yeah.
And even if we're planning experiential activations for the brands we work on, it's the tactical, active engagements that really get the most resonance, particularly for younger consumers.
Yeah, Sarah, thoughts on this? I mean,
I think,
certainly you're tracking it, right? You're asking brands and people, right?
Yeah, and I think being cognizant of the mind state of the people answering those questions in this moment is essential. So keeping in mind that the things that they are prioritizing are probably not whether or not we care about them coming back to large events. So we're conscious of that, of course. I mean, I think Ian made a lot of good points. We're definitely seeing a pent-up demand, and I think that the comment around enjoying and acknowledging and being grateful for the simple things, sports has become one of those things where we had no idea that you could ever turn off the switch and that it would go away almost overnight, and that we would all be going, but where's my basketball? Where's my hockey? Where's my playoffs? And so everybody's going, I want that content. And so we see it, whether it's NASCAR going on Fox and getting 1 million viewers, right? It might have been incredible content. It might not have been that great, but people are so hungry for it that either way, it's going to get the eyeballs at this second. I think that we will go back to live events. There is nothing that we've seen so far that can replace the in-person experience that you get standing in front of a speaker at a concert or being at a game. It's just irreplaceable. But the idea of extending it beyond and thinking about how we can now engage and captivate fans who were never going to physically be able to be there in person is an interesting idea to think about as the new normal, and how we extend that experience beyond. And how brands can tap into everything we're figuring out digitally to make it a better experience once we do go back to some semblance of normal, knowing that the first couple large gatherings are also going to have a lot of baggage with them, whether we're wearing masks, whether we're fully present, whether there's social distancing, or even some sort of barrier of how close we can actually get in those scenarios. I mean, there's so much still unfolding every day that it feels sort of not silly, but perhaps not all that productive to imagine what could be possible, because we really don't know. But trying to stay abreast of what people are thinking about, what they're open to, even in these moments, to know that at this second, if you talk to Gen Z and millennial males, the number one thing they're missing is sports. That's fantastic news at this second. So to the silver lining idea, I'll finish everything I say with some sort of optimism, apparently. It's something that we're excited to go back to.
Yeah, and Cary, you and I have talked a lot about this, that we feel there will be, and I think it's consistent with the comments we've heard, is there will be this desire, this pent up demand to reawaken, a rebirth. It will butt up against some of the anxiety about returning to mass gatherings, but it does spell opportunity, doesn't it? Right.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of an optimistic call, which is nice, which I think,
yes.
I think because I think Gavin sometimes pushes me in that I can be overly optimistic in these situations. But I will,
that was a backhanded way of saying I'm a pessimist. Was that?
Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, I always say pessimists always say they're realists, by the way.
Well, damn. Okay.
Anytime you say that all the time, people do that all the time. Oh, I'm not. I hear what
I'm a realist.
saying. Every time somebody says they're a realist to me, they're consistently pessimists. So, I think one of the things that you have time to do during this time is I'm doing a lot of Googling, and you're looking at the sports industry. And so I found something to me that's really optimistic. Is I'm going to flip the tables on you here. Does anybody here know who the highest paid athlete, factoring inflation, is? Who the highest paid athlete of all time is?
Babe Ruth.
That's good guess. Yes, we're close in the ballpark. Go further back.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
it's not really, for me. This answer
no,
is
it's
not
really almost no. So and I only found this a few days ago. I'm actually not even going to say that. I'm not going to say the name because I can't pronounce it properly. But it's a chariot racer. So in the year zero,
I was going to say that, guys.
in the year around
Ben-Hur
in that era, they and also the other thing, the largest crowds in history were not Michigan State; they were chariot races. There were 250,000 people watching live.
Sarah and Ian, I apologize. Let's just see where this goes.
I was going to say a week ago I didn't know that, but the but the reality is the live sports aren't I'd be more definitive than they're not going anywhere. Like I would argue that this is still it's a blip in time, you know, even if someone works 40 years, you know, 3 months is about half of 1% of their work career, let alone over a, 100-year period. And every time there's a lockout in hockey, people all said they won't come back. Didn't take them very long, but there were thousands of people saying I'll never watch again, and 9/11. And so where I would agree, I think there is a percentage of people that will be nervous. But I would argue there's a equally, now I don't have I don't have the numbers or any data on this, but I would argue there's an equal number that may do, that may want to come back so badly that they may go to 4 concerts. And, and Ian had suggested, you're going to lose those 3 months. You're right. But I think there'll be some people that go to 4 concerts in October that may have gone to April, June, August, October. Then that's on the front of the curve. And that's the hope. And again, that's the optimist in me. But I do think that, as Sarah said, there's nothing like large gatherings. There was always a talk of, you can have a giant screen TV or replicate it in a bar or a restaurant. There's no resemblance. It's not just, there's no similarity. So I think it's human nature. So, so my feeling is that it's all coming back. It's just a matter of time.
A couple things. One, what surprised me a little bit is I expected at this point the networks to have come up with more innovative ways of staying engaged with giving consumers content, because we're still seeing, and listen, I've worked for Rogers Media, I've worked in the Bell Media family, so this is just an observation that right now we're still seeing replay after replay after replay and plays of the decade. And I've joked that I'm only slightly less nervous watching the Raptors championship run the second time. My daughter and I were watching Game 7 against Philly, and she still grabbed my arm as Kawhi was rounding the bend. It was hilarious. But I expected some innovation from that group in terms of maybe doing virtual panel discussions and things of that nature. So I'm curious that maybe I hope they're hunkered down, planning that. The other thing is, what I'm wondering about is what are the discussions happening in MLB's office, in TIFF's office, about what kind of protection as a property, what is our role as a property to offer fans a safe environment? Because when we returned from 9/11, there was greatly enhanced security protocols. I envision greatly enhanced sanitation and concourses filled with stations to sanitize your hands, and maybe offering masks. I don't know if they'll be supplied. Does the virtual table here have any thoughts on those comments?
I'm going to make one quick one, which is that I think we have to acknowledge how quickly this all happened. So to the relief of Bell and Rogers, I think that, our March 1 company update said nothing about closing our office in a couple weeks. So the idea of getting prepared for this and then having the ability to come together as a team to say, what's our innovative, strategic, thoughtful approach in this moment? I think that might be expecting something that was impossible, that they would have loved to have done, but just never prioritized. And I think that in the second, we're all finding things that we can do that we never were able to prioritize before. And so trying to make the most of this moment is something we're all conscious of doing. In terms of the way that we'll come back and the circumstances and the role of the leagues, obviously it's going to be something that I think consumers will now expect, right? It's not just going to be what are they planning to do from a requirement or a regulatory perspective, but really what are fans going to feel more comfortable coming back to. And I think seeing a lot of sanitization stands or stations will certainly help put minds at ease and allow them to fully appreciate being there in person. Things like that might be necessary from a mental health perspective, even more so than from an actual sanitization lens. I mean, you have no idea where people are coming from. It might not be all that useful, but just visually, optically, it might help. So I'll throw it over to the guys to continue expanding on that, but I just wanted to give them a little bit of an
relief. Yes. Well said. More than fair.
None of us have done our jobs before in a pandemic, so we should give ourselves a little bit of room there. But I think in crisis comes innovation, and I think as we get into week 3, week 4, we'll see the really special things come out of brands and come out of properties that are really going to resonate. In terms of our experiential practice, we've already set in our protocols for how we will come back in terms of how we engage with consumers. That includes what we're calling the theater sanitization, meaning being very visible to have a very strong focus on that. Hand sanitizer stations will now be forever in each of our footprints. We don't plan to give away premiums for maybe up to 12 months. We're thinking about how we use technology and touch points and that sort of thing. We're sort of, content used to be king, now it's content first. So, and how do you be more digital? So if you're giving away a premium, can it be a digital premium? Can it be a gift card? Can it be something like that? But I think the key distinction is that people's psychological safety will be more important far long after their physical safety is addressed.
Yeah. Cary?
I think on this one, there's a relatively recent precedent to me, which is security after 9/11. And I think that was an example at sporting events. My wife and I happened to we went to New York City on the Millennial. That was our decision to go to Times Square on 2000.
So you're crazy.
Well, yeah. See now, but see that's as you say that, right? So in 2002,
even then I would have said it.
Okay, maybe, but it didn't. See, here's the thing. It did. That's the funny thing about it. We would never have gone into. We realized on about September 12th how crazy that of September 2001, how crazy that was. But in the the one we went was still the largest group that's ever been there, because 2 years later that changed. There were 3 million people in Times Square and limited security. Never again, right? It would never, nothing like that would ever, and we can't conceive of the craziness that we went then. And I think September 11th did that with everything, with the way airport security is, and I think people just are, in fact, probably much more comfortable. If you went to an airport now and there was no security or limited, you'd be really uncomfortable. So to me, it reminds me of, I think the way everything will be treated relative to sanitation and health, to me, will be that to me is a model of sort of that we, in North America anyway. I'm not sure if that resonated to the same extent in Europe, but I think we live in a, the terms used all the time, post 9/11 world. I think our millennials can't relate to maybe that, but I think for us, I think so to me, as you guys, as Ian, you said there in particular, I think, it's deciding what does that look like, and people will expect it. I think people will want to go to a Blue Jays game where there's 40,000 people, but they're sure as heck going to want to make sure that every possible thing is in place to that there's no risk of contamination. So I think it's a good model.
Good. Oh, great feedback. I do much of we'll shift to Helping Moment. I do much of my work helping properties generate revenue. I know, Cary, we collaborate a lot on that. And it's very clear that this is a time to help and support and not sell. Helping Moment, not a selling moment. And Ian, we've used that. I've heard you say that. It has been heartwarming to see people and companies step up. So my first question, that's a given. We all know that. Just maybe a little bit of a different twist on this is do you feel brands need to be mindful of authenticity in a time like this, where obviously the answer to that is always yes, should always be yes. But in a time like this, can they do harm if they are trying to help. And I qualify that by, I've maybe noticed some brands where I question, what is their real motive here? Like, have they established, given their brand attributes and their brand behavior to this point before, that they maybe have permission to act as they are now in the way they're helping, whereas others, it feels like they're just jumping in. And but again, maybe that's okay at a time like this. What Sarah, why don't we go back and start with you on this?
These are uncharted waters, right? So the idea of what is acceptable or allowed or expected or going to be received well is just unknown. So I think that the idea of suggesting that there's some rule book for this moment, I don't think one exists. What we're seeing so far is that we're still so early days that the brands that are stepping up with meaningful, helpful ways to make an impact today, the ones like Rogers and Bell waiving overages, the Budweisers of the world redirecting $5 million to help fight COVID, the distilleries in the US shifting to sanitizer production, those are the ones that at this second are getting the recognition as being focused on the right things. And I think it's a question of how can you communicate that you're focused on the right things, which comes back to the broader discussion about timing around what are you going to say and when are you going to say it, so that you can start to build up. Rest assured, we're focused on that. At the same time, here's something we think that will either add value to your day, brighten your day, give you something to consume for the next 2 hours, entertain you, whatever that might be. But it's all going to have to come from a place that feels authentic. To your point, I mean, that is a no-brainer, that has to come back to a place of authenticity. And if opportunism is something that people take away from that communication, it's not going to bode well. So right. I think that playing this out little by little and being conscious and looking at the response that you're getting on each interaction will be really important, right, so that you understand how people are reacting to you, and you can then expand on that or dive into something that you see getting really great engagement and then moving on from there. But really being focused on taking that feedback that consumers will be happy to give you, because not only do they have the time and the means, but it's something that obviously they're able to do.
Raw.
So
yeah,
absolutely. So I think being very conscious of that first message and the expectation, and then, contributing in the right ways in a way that feels possible and authentic, and then going from there.
Ian?
I think first and foremost, it's making sure as a brand, you're not coming off as tone deaf, that you're not bringing the wrong message at the wrong moment. I think also you need to think about what you're doing for, not just talking about, for your employees, your consumers or customers, and then your community. One of the metrics, I'm not suggesting this is the context, but one of the metrics I've seen a lot out of our clients and other brands is this is the right thing to do. It's not, this is what's going to give us good brand health lift, what's going to get good conversation or good clicks, is this is the right thing to do. And what I also have seen is silos break down at brands where corporate communications, brand, PR, HR are all coming together to create solutions that are easy to cascade and that work. I think it's really, really critical, and I've seen this a little bit from some brands where they're saying something but not doing something. So better to do than just say. One of our clients' competitors put a TV spot out recognizing frontline healthcare workers and thanking them. Okay, you spent media against that. Would those dollars have been better suited to go to support what those frontline healthcare workers are doing? So I think, the message and the talk and the walk, you got to do the walk. And if you do the walk, you will ultimately get recognized and you get attribution, but make sure you're not the person talking about the walk. As a brand.
I'm confused. Talking about, no, I'm kidding. No, that's great.
But at the same time, if nobody knows that you're doing it, you'll never be recognized. So
it's a blend, right?
I think there's a balance there, because I mean, obviously we're all in business. We're trying to stay in business. Right. There has to be at some level, some recognition of doing something. So I totally hear you. I think it's the discussion of what's the right balance and what is the right thing to do, and then to help make sure that people know that you're focused on it.
Yeah, sorry, just to clarify, maybe make sure you're not starting the conversation. but also make sure that your communication is showing not your brand first, but the action first.
Yeah,
and the intended benefactor of that action.
Ian, before we move to Cary, I'd be remiss, like one of your top clients is a brand that was about to shift into full-on Olympic celebration, activation mode. Toyota, amazing job last go round in terms of bringing their Olympic spirit and campaign to life. This was going to be a big year, especially where it was going to be held. Tokyo, it's being pushed back to 2021. What is maybe a little insight into what kind of conversations you've been having? I love their communication. I trust they're doing something more than that, to your point, but they've come out with, the right tone and the right kind of message at a time like this. Just maybe some insights into what Toyota's been doing, thinking, saying.
It's a big thing because we obviously have domestic COC and CPC rights. We have NOC NSO partners. We have athletes. We have global rights, IOC top partner, IPC partner, games partner. It's fully integrated. And Toyota always grounds back to values, and it was about what's the right public health move here from a Olympic Paralympic community perspective, and then how do we make sure our athletes are safe and supported. So shifting to next year is complex because there's obviously a lot of plans that were in place, and shifting it to next year is complex but not unfathomable. It's the right thing to do right across the board.
And Cary and I have talked about this. That one of the silver linings I'm seeing is if you were not in the case of Toyota, so I'm not saying this on the back of that comment, but it just leads me to this thought, and then we'll get Cary's insights into this question. But the luxury of time, sponsorship discussions often get hindered by the pressure of time and scrambling, the events coming up and properties are trying to get a partner engaged. Now we have maybe the luxury of pausing, doing what's right in a time like this, and then restarting the conversation at the right time with ample runway. And maybe we will do it differently than we would have if we would have been rushing to just fit it in to the 2020 version of whatever that event would have been.
And just so I know this question's for Cary, but just to address that question a little bit is that because of the postponement, we sort of look at this as a soft boil year, meaning there's a cycle to engagement around Olympics and Paralympics. And we will have more opportunity to leverage those relationships over the next year than we normally would in an off year.
There you go.
And then we also have the context that Beijing will be almost on top of Tokyo. So that compressed cycle will mean more room for innovation, more room to find ways to bring the Olympics and Paralympics home and make them relevant for Canadians in this market for sure.
Yeah, great point. Cary, thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just echoing what everybody's saying, but sincerity will win the day. I think it's just the mistake for anybody, if it's a property or a brand, is if you feel like by the way. In other words, here we're doing something for healthcare workers, or we're providing a credit on phones. By the way, would you like to buy? In other words, if it comes too soon, or it's in the same message, or it's not, I think the brands generally that do a great job of it, when Bell Let's Talk or Kraft Hockeyville, they don't talk about Kraft Hockeyville and mix it in with your cheese slices. And I think that in a bigger scope here, I think that people will know that Bell sells phones, or McDonald's sells hamburgers, or Toyota sells cars, or the Toronto Rock sells lacrosse tickets. They're not going to forget that. So the mistake that I think some brands are doing and some organizations are doing is they're too tightly mixing the two things. Whereas I think now is a time to listen and focus on one specific. That to me shows sincerity more than anything, is if you kind of you park your sales objectives entirely because it's going to circle back, and this period of time will be relatively short. But I think there's still a fair bit of that, by the way, mentality. People are too smart. If you
and
feel
sensitive
like
right now.
sensitive right now, if you feel like somebody's doing something, but there's really a hidden
ulterior
motivation of any. So anyway, I think that's the key in my mind.
We're seeing so much, I think, right now, what brands are doing, whether it's, Bauer releasing the technology so that their face mask technology can be, or products can be mass produced, right? Sarah, you gave some great examples of brands. What can properties be doing right now? What can they be helping at a time like this? Cary, maybe have you seen any of your property clients? I'll give you one thought. I know some stadiums have been repurposed, right? For hospital fields.
Yes. So look, I think things. So I would say, I was going to answer a different way, but I would say the first thing, things like what Bauer is doing is paramount, and I think that people will remember that. I think if you're in a position where there's something tangible you can do that will make a difference, so you turn your stadium into a hospital or anything. I think I would say that first, but I would say secondly, if you can't do that, or you don't necessarily know how to, I can tell you, we had a call, we're doing some training calls, and the Brampton Beast hockey team is a very small brand in Brampton, but we have a staff of 10 and some interns, and our objective is to reach out to everybody in Brampton, not Brampton Beast fans, and not sponsors, and not former sponsors, and not potential. We're going to start there, but our concept would be to reach out to people that have zero relationship with the hockey team, but just to say, how are you? And there's nothing, and those conversations won't have anything to do with the hockey team or who we are. And I think organizations that, properties that still have people there and are able to do that. I think what we have found, which I could say maybe this is a really positive thing that we've learned in the last 10 days, is people love having these conversations. Like, our guys are having long conversations about, people want to talk. They're at home, their situation, their world is upside down. So people want to talk maybe more than any time I can remember. So I would say it's a bit of a funny answer there, but I think if you can communicate and listen and have meaningful conversations with people about life and their reality and their world, it seems to be that's more important than ever. So, I'd lead with what Bauer's doing. If you can do it, is the best way to go. But if you're not able to do that, I think just listening and having meaningful conversations, I think is very powerful.
Yeah. Any other thoughts from the table?
I think that this is an interesting time for players and for the humans behind the uniforms to really step up. Mm-hmm. So whether it's Zach Hyman playing video games with fans, it's not necessarily something he might have had the forethought to carve out in his schedule to make that opportunity to build that relationship with fans on a different level than anything he'd ever done before. But at the same time, it's the kind of thing that is uplifting and creating a relationship and a connection at this moment that is going to be, I think, long lasting. And so thinking about whether it's Serge Ibaka creating Instagram content, whatever.
Talking to the medical community, right?
Exactly. Austin Matthews and Sick Kids. I think that there's a humanizing of these players that could be something that they benefit from for a long time, if they're clever enough to try and add value in the right ways at this moment. And so authentic engagement with fans, creating great content, showing that, how they're staying fit or how they're exing from home.
You're seeing a lot of great content, aren't you, on social with athletes and celebrities and how they're managing through it.
Exactly. And try to keep the conversation going. There are a lot of humans behind these leagues that are continuing to work hard to think about what the next step will be. But at this second, I think that Cary said it best. What can we do in this moment to try to add value? And so these players, I think, are an interesting option for that.
Yeah. Ian, any thoughts?
Yeah, just whether you're a brand or a property. I mean, a property is a brand. This is the time to earn trust that you will leverage after. And if you're looking at your COVID-19 strategy, start with how are you evaluating or reassessing what you were doing and what your immediate future looks like? How are you then responding to the crisis? And then how are you preparing for after the crisis? Because after the crisis, unless we spend time and energy putting some strategic thinking there, the world will come back, and it's going to come back fast. And to the points we've been discussing on the call, we need to be mindful about how consumers will show up differently and how we need to show up differently. So there's a lot to be done, but making sure you're saying and doing the right things at the right time is just really critical.
Yeah. Any other, before we move to the last topic, any other brands and you said it well, Ian, properties or brands as well. So we'll, it could be celebrities, it could be people, but more keep it in the sponsorship marketing realm, which includes brands and properties. Who's standing out to you right now as doing great things? And Sarah, you gave some good examples in your initial answer. Please, anybody just chime in with any thoughts.
I'll let the guys go first.
Yeah.
I think harkening back
who's caught your attention, right? For lack of a better term. It doesn't have to be somebody you're working with.
Yeah, I think harkening back to what Sarah was saying earlier, I think a lot of brands are still trying to find their footing and get their messaging out. I think that it's amazing how quickly you can move when you need to. Last week, we were involved in an IMC multi-agency effort around messaging for a client's response to COVID. In 48 hours, we probably did 4 months worth of work. It just moved fast and aligned, and we got it done. And that was a long 48 hours, but nonetheless. And seeing brands put out commercial TVCs because the media tracking is showing people are watching a lot more broadcasts right now, and the internet pipe is getting punched because there's so much content, including streaming, going through. So finding consumers where they are, but seeing a brand put a brand spot out that has no shoot attached to it and is all edit suite that's done remotely is just amazing. So I think it's teaching a lot of us how we can be more nimble and more reactive going forward and coming out of this. I think Adidas is doing a really great job. Nike's done a great job in just showing up with the right tone of voice, with the right message in front of the right audience, and that's the win.
Yeah, Cary, any thoughts?
I would say that the brands that can do something in the current climate. I don't know. I notice Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes, and as Sarah mentioned, Bell and Rogers. If you're doing something that doesn't relate to COVID, the strategy is probably going to be hollow. So the Bowers, you hear GM is going to be making face masks, and I think those. I think the examples being relevant, and the whole world is dealing with one situation. So I think I would say that. Yeah. But Ian made the point too. I think people are trying to figure it out really fast. I mean, and to Sarah's point, we played a hockey game on March 10th. There was no issues. There wasn't even any consideration of not playing that game. So you think of how quickly. The speed, how quickly this has happened. In some ways, it feels like, I know to a lot of people, it's been, we're not even through a month. So I just think adjusting is pretty tough, pretty quick.
I'm sure you guys are seeing this too, but the fashion industry, I mean, for me, that's been a big one in terms of stepping up, and whether it's Christian Siriano making 1,000 masks a week, or even Smythe's brand here in Canada, doing a 10-minute Instagram tutorial on how to make your own mask at home, and literally showing you a step-by-step of how to protect yourself. That, I think, completely echoes, Cary, what you're saying in terms of what is the value that you can add to this moment. Is that a long-term strategy? No. Are they going to create a mini series about masks? Probably not. But in this second, I thought it was really valuable content that made me feel a little bit more in control of the situation, which is something that we all are salivating for, that idea of how do I just take a little bit more ownership over the second and feel a bit more in control than I did 10 minutes ago. And so the idea of a brand saying, here's exactly how to protect yourself. Here's the step-by-step of how big to cut the fabric and then where to sew it. And, you know, and giving that kind of advice and content, I think is really important. And those brands, I do agree with everything Ian said as well, in terms of those are the memories that we will now attach to those brands, and they will get a little bit more of a share of mind when I see them through Instagram. And I'll stop a little bit more frequently to see what they're up to and what they're saying in the future, because now I feel a little bit closer to the value that they bring. So I think that this is a speck in the grand scheme of things, but it is a really powerful moment.
I would just,
go ahead.
I just want to add one quick thing. I think we were talking a lot about, which is obviously the primary thing, relief to health and the immediate. The second one is financial.
Yeah,
people need financial relief.
I was actually going to go there. Yeah,
everybody needs financial relief. So, I think Sarah made the point. I didn't know that Bell and Rogers lifted the overage.
Yeah.
I had somebody. There was a big issue yesterday. It was people were talking about that Loblaws was charging a delivery fee for, and I don't know if they are, they aren't, to be honest. But I think organizations that are lifting the financial burden is second, but it's unparalleled. So I think if that's a second way that companies that maybe can't be Bauer and make masks, or can't, the second way is, can they stop their billing? And I think a lot of companies are in positions to do that, where they can suspend payments or make adjustments. And by the way, I've just real quick, sorry, I found a mix. Like, we work with a lot of companies, and some are very understanding and others are a bit business as usual. And maybe it's somebody in the credit department, but it reflects poorly upon the organization when someone is asking for $1,000 that normally was due, and if they're not prefacing it. Some big companies are really poor at that right now, where there's still a bit too much business as usual. So I would say that that's important too.
And what I'm starting to see along that line, you're right, there's a massive financial crisis, on the back of this health crisis, no question. And that will last for a long time, even after we resume back, to living our lives. Normally, what I found interesting, I think it was James Patterson, acclaimed novelist, has started a fund to support independent booksellers. Right, brands like Molson, and you work with Labatt, and finding ways to help restaurants and bars and small operators in that space, because the small medium businesses are the heart of our economy in many respects. And I think you see a lot of the big brands, but it's these little ones are suffering tremendously. So I'm starting to be heartened by efforts to get that small medium business standing on its feet or weathering the storm. There's as I say, that restaurant community has just been devastated by this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's the big brands are getting visibility, and those are some of them we've been referencing just now, but mid-size and small businesses that are bearing a big brunt of the financial burden are doing amazing things as well. A friend of mine runs a office furniture manufacturing company, and they're converting production to build partitions for hospital wards. Another guy I know who is in the recycling business from a product perspective is making masks and gowns, and they're not big companies, but they're doing what they can to give back to their community and to contribute. And it's also being human, much like we've been talking. The big brands are.
And the last one, quick one, is seeing big brands that are benefiting through this not that they intended to, but they're the unintended beneficiaries. So the Zooms, the Netflixes. Netflix, I was pleased to see, created a big fund to give back to support the more independent layer of the content creation community. And I hope you'll see brands like Zoom find ways to give back, because what a boom they've gone through, right? And nobody nobody is held, nobody has to do anything, but I think this is a time where everybody's almost expecting that. So, which creates to me opportunity. So let's wrap with optimism, and we've had a lot of it throughout, and it's wonderful, and thank you for that. My thoughts before the question is, we go through life, we easily slip into autopilot mode in our personal, professional lives, going through the motions, a sense of complacency. We're human beings; it just happens. And I'm really upset with Ian because he mentioned the term, and I had already gone out and printed T-shirts with this. But so I guess I can't claim it's mine. But that from crisis comes innovation, and I did read an article in Forbes that went down this path, and it said through that crisis produces innovation accelerators. And it's so true, and you're seeing it. So while COVID-19 has shaken us to the core, it's also forced us to rethink how we live, how we communicate, how we do business, how we run business, and that reimagining can be a good thing. So I'll stop rambling there and invite comments. Maybe Cary, if you want to start, silver linings that are coming from this, right? That maybe the unintended consequences of a global pandemic.
Yeah, I think it's sort of, it seems somewhat awkward to use those words, but I think they're important. I think we become better. Look, I think a lot of things aren't happening. People aren't talking about wars between countries, and you're not talking, there's a lot of other things. It seems funny to say, well, but there's no other news. There are very few conflicts that are relevant anywhere. There's a real, yes, we all maybe feel like we're in a movie, which is, I think, a part of this whole moment that's going on. But I think there is a really, the world is sort of banding together, and I think that's very empowering and makes you believe in the future. And I think we can sort of band together and do that. And I just go back to the thing is, it's a couple of you said it. It's a moment in time, which when you're in the middle of it, it's the great line that it's darkest before the dawn. It's very hard to see it, but nothing in this pandemic suggests that there isn't an end date. It may scare people when they hear it's 18 months, but nobody's saying it's 18 years, and there's an end. So there's an end, and there's some, I think we're going to get there. And I think so I think it's really, if we take this as an opportunity to plan ahead and realize that there will be tremendous pent up energy for people to come out when live entertainment, in particular in that space. Let's be better and figure it out. So, but I think it is important. What I would just leave with is a lot of people, Gavin, I think you said it, particularly I think people that are younger that haven't been through anything like this. They don't. I mean, a lot of people are lost, and I think if we can bring some of that optimism, I think it's extremely important. I think a lot of other people don't start there. They're doom and gloom, and I can't go outside, and I'm sitting at my computer. And we have a lot of people work with us, Gavin knows, in their 20s. And it's a bit surprising, to be honest. They're struggling I'm generalizing, but more than those in their 40s and 50s and 60s. I find that don't know what to do with themselves. And I think if we can make sure that message has a lot of optimism, and I think that's really important.
Yeah. I started with Sarah, so I'm going to end with Sarah. So Ian, why don't you take it next?
Yeah, thank you. I think we all have a choice in how we place our energy, and we can either place it in pessimism or optimism. I tend to fall on the side of optimism. I think
I'm a realist.
You're a realist. That's what your T-shirt says.
Yeah, nice try.
But I think whether it's as people, as organizations, we're going to come out. Those that come out, because there will be casualties from a business perspective for sure. But those that come out the other side will be more efficient, better, stronger, faster. I think Cary mentioned it earlier. 9/11 fundamentally changed us. And I think aside from the war that followed, North American society at least became kinder and gentler. We live in Greektown in Toronto, and I haven't been out of my neighborhood in I think 3 weeks, or it might be 9 years. I can't 6 months. I can't remember. But just
what day is it?
Yeah, yesterday. Today.
Yeah, that's right.
It's today.
That's right.
It's today.
It's
the day before tomorrow. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
But it's interesting, just when going for a walk around the neighborhood, people are smiling and saying hello as we both get off the sidewalk in socially responsible ways.
Birth. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think this will fundamentally change us, and obviously the length and depth of it will impact to what degree. But I only see good on the other side. There's a lot of pain to go through in the midpoint, but as we said, it's a moment in time.
Yeah, Sarah.
So I'll preface my response with the fact that I am healthy, and my family's healthy, and everyone that I care about is healthy, and so my perspective on this, I think, is potentially more unique, but the reality that I can try to focus on the things that I do have control over. I think the resiliency that we've seen in terms of what people can actually handle has been amazing. The types of outputs that we can create when we're not sitting in the same room together has been really eye-opening. And I do think that will have a lasting impact. I mean, my gratitude has been completely renewed from the simplest, roof over my head and being in Canada to the fact that I am able to do my work from home. I mean, there's so many people who don't have that luxury and who are forced to go out into the world in this moment and be scared to go to work, or don't have a job to go to because nobody's eating at their restaurant anymore. So I think that being able to have a purpose and to figure out a way to balance this has been really, I think, eye-opening. I would never have expected that we could have done this well under these circumstances. And Cary, to your point around the youth, I think that in the big picture, this is now a life experience that they've had. And so they're building this mental memory of what it's like to be in these situations. And I think that having an empowered workforce of Gen Zs and millennials who are focused on not just getting through these moments, but it will probably happen again. So how are we going to tackle this differently? What are the lasting pieces of technology that will roll into making the next solution that much quicker? How are we going to benefit from this shared global sense of priority to figure this out and have a solution on the table as quickly as possible? I mean, there is a lot of things to be grateful for in this moment. And I think as long as we all stay focused on the right things, then we'll get to the other side as quickly as possible.
Well,
great point.
That's a great way to wrap, guys. Thank you. It was a longer chat, but than I promised you. So thanks for staying in and staying engaged. But yeah, just great insights, and wishing you health and enjoy. Be grateful for all those little things, but have a great weekend, and we will connect soon. Thanks so much.
It was just Gavin. I just say it was great. It was thanks for I appreciate meeting Sarah and Nina. It was a really nice conversation. So Gavin, thanks for putting it together.
Yeah,
appreciate
it.
Okay, bye bye.
Take care.
Bye bye.
Bye.